Please start, Kseniya.
Hi, everybody. Today we are discussing the topic of how IT industry can help with the fight of COVID pandemic. And our panel today is called Technology as a Remedy. My name is Kseniya Bukshina. I'm a journalist from Ukraine. I'm a founder of TAG Publishing House and the Institute for Constructive Media of Ukraine. And now I would like to present you our speakers, our experts who today will help us to discuss the topic. Please welcome Dr. Gregory Asmolov from King's College London, Romi Davidor, co-founder and director of CatalystIL community, and Jonas Onland. I will read the long introduction. Senior Advisor, Innovation and Upscaling Member Partnership Digital Transformation of the Urban Agenda in Association of Dutch Municipalities. Well, now I will tell a few words about the agenda and the timing of our meeting. Now our experts will have for about 5-7 minutes to present their ideas and thoughts on the topic. Some of you have these slides to prove them. Let us start. Dr. Gregory, you're the first to start. You're welcome. And then we will have time for questions for discussion. And you're welcome to ask the questions and discuss with each other the topic. And I will also take part in that. Let us start.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this introduction and an opportunity to share some of the outcomes of the recent research. And I would like to share just some very brief insights without any presentation. So indeed, we could see that innovation plays a very substantial role as a response to any type of crisis, and particularly in the case of the coronavirus crisis. We could see, for instance, that different type of applications and platforms play the substantial role to create personal protective equipment in different countries. And this is something that took place not only in a specific country, but there are a lot of different type of movements of people that used 3D printers to produce this protective equipment. We could see a lot of different type of initiatives on hyper-local level for facilitation of mutual aid and the different forms of mobilization of volunteers in order to address various aspects of the current crisis. So again, we could see that it's kind of quite different depending on different countries. In some countries where there is a very high scale of trust between people in neighborhoods, so we could see a very effective hyperlocal projects. In other countries where we see that there are neighbors don't really trust other neighbors and there is a problem with horizontal trust, it's much more difficult to introduce projects for facilitation of horizontal mutual aid. But I think at this point, we are in a point of transformation from the discussion about the role of the technologies to address the crisis to discussion of the role of technologies to address the new normal that emerged as a part of this crisis. So it's less about how we're going to track the virus, it's less about how we're going to produce protective equipment, and more about addressing the big challenges of employment, of education, of our everyday life, because as it looks like now, it's all has changed substantially, and the role of technologies now is really to address this new type of normal reality. And here I would like to conclude by saying that yes, technology is a part of remedy, but it's not the remedy. We should avoid being so-called technological determinists that say that technology can help us with everything. It's more about the social and political context, and we can see that different type of technologies play a different role depending on the role of local political institutions and depending on the culture. And therefore, we need to be very sensitive about the role of innovation in different socio-cultural contexts. And we also should facilitate the dialogue between the experience in different countries. And here I come to my point about the role of Eastern European countries that has a very unique socio-cultural context that produce a very unique type of products and unique type of innovation. So I think that by creation of channels to exchange experience and by trying to develop a framework for global innovation, building on experience in different countries, we can facilitate more effective process and avoid maybe some mistakes that has been done by our colleagues in other countries. So just to conclude, yes, technology is a remedy to a limited extent, but we always need to remember about the context, and we should focus on development of the right institutions and right frameworks for collaboration in order to make this innovation effective, in order to address the new normal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Romi, you are the next to present your ideas, and then we will have the discussion of what we heard and already.
So hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to do a share screen for the presentation. So one moment. Okay. So hi, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Romi Davidor, and I'm the director of CatalystIL, first of a kind professional community whose essence is to develop the knowledge and the profession of innovation management in organizations, both the public sector and the private sector, and on a regional level. I operate under the Israel Innovation Institute, which is a non-profit organization that was founded in 2011. With a very clear aim of encouraging Israeli companies and entrepreneurs to find solutions for global challenges and strengthen the social and economic development in the state of Israel. The Institute decided to focus on objectives that would have a wide public impact and strives to advance them through innovation communities and open innovation processes in accordance with a unique model that we developed in the Institute. I'm trying to move the slides, but wait, let me check. Hold on a minute. Let's do a new one. Okay, I think this one will work. If it doesn't happen, it's not a real Zoom presentation. So under the Israel Innovation Institute, we have, the vision of placing Israel as an innovation hub for global challenges, as I mentioned. And we operate in different fields. So we have the field of smart mobility, digital health, agriculture, desert and climate change. And today I'm actually going to focus on what our CatalystIL, our digital health community, did during COVID-19 and the use of technology. And we have extensive activity, but this is the real issue for today's kind of talk. The goal, I said it, we don't have much time, so I'm going to run through this, but it's actually creating Israel as a huge living lab. As you know, Israel is, the startup nation, but it's not enough to be the startup nation. We want to be implementation nation and make sure that more and more technologies are actually implemented in our everyday life. So this is what we strive for. And focusing on what we did in the health section in Israel. So it's really going through the different phases that we went through. So today we're going to focus on the way we managed to catalyze health innovation evolution during the Corona crisis. So CatalystIL, really kind of in a nutshell, focuses on three kind of pillars. The first thing is healthcare innovation. We want to make sure that all the government, hospitals, and health organizations in Israel are catalyzed with innovation, serving society. So this is one pillar. The other one is making sure that we have an ultimate marketplace, fostering collaborations with different entities in the ecosystem, making sure that health organizations know how to work with startups, that knows how to work with corporates and the government and the entire stakeholders. And the most important thing, that we are very, very focused on challenge centric. So it means that each process has to have a backup of a challenge. We don't just do things because we think it's a great idea. Everything has to be backed with real problems and real issues that has to be solved. So what we're going to talk about today really briefly in the couple of minutes that I have left is that the case study of what we did in CatalystIL. So we found four main trends that was the activity during the Corona crisis, and the different phases that we decided that we realized that very quickly we have to give kind of an answer to the chaos that was here, like in most countries. And there was a lot of noise and a lot of information and a lot of different people that wanted to help in a lot of different ways. So we decided to be the one player, the one entity that kind of organizes all that noise and make sure that we are kind of the controlling kind of arm of the entire operation between technologies and startups and different health organizations in Israel. So the phase that we did, going backwards. So as you can see on the graph, there was a number of active patients during kind of the first crisis before we came in a corona routine. And we decided to bring up a website. That was the first counter corona. It was in our own website, and there health organizations could put up online all the different challenges that they had. After that, we had a different website with another partners from the Israeli ecosystem. And then was the huge marketplace that was actually became a global one. And it was a couple of months ago. And this is still going on, the marketplace. And it was really differentiating the crisis times and the routine times now addressing the pandemic. So what we did later on, is now the first thing that we understood was that there's less attention in organizations to apply solutions. And I think we're going to talk about it later. It is one of the most difficult things that we had now in the corona. Organizations were fighting lives and not really open to talk about technology. So this is one thing that we understood. And you can see that on the graph, kind of the attention of the health organizations talking about technology and understanding how to bring in applicable solutions for the corona. And then this is the graph in pink. This is in Hebrew, and I left it because I thought it would be cute and it would be nice to show you. But the other thing was that we went from crisis management to dynamic routine management. So on the blues, you can see the different challenges, and it doesn't matter for right now, but the different challenges that were really critical in the beginning, and the pink ones were critical for the routine time. And you can see kind of the different challenges that we went through. The other thing was, and I know that I'm running out of time, the third thing was supply and demand of operation and logistics was something that we saw that was very, very crucial during the pandemic. And you can see the number of challenges on the left that were uploaded to the platform, and the number of solutions, which is huge numbers that actually gave a great solution to these challenges. And we're talking on a nationwide. So it's not just one health organization, it was national-wise in Israel. And the fourth thing, as you can see, were the different stages of the implementation that was possible from different stakeholders. So just to sum it up really quick, and I know this was really on one foot, but over 1,000 submissions from the entire ecosystem regarding the challenges during the pandemic. These are the companies and the different companies that have operated that were not even in the health sector, which was a huge opportunity for a lot of technologies to make a switch into this world. And we can see it until now. And in the graph, you can see the different stages of the idea. So there was a lot of technologies that were just kind of in an idea phase, and 51, which is quite a number, were already ready to adapt and kind of implement in health organizations. This is how the marketplace looked like. All the different squares are challenges that startups could apply by clicking. And that was me very, very quick. We can take questions as we go along through the panel. But this is kind of a case study of what happened in Israel on our side, talking about pandemic and the technology with it.
Thank you very much, Romi. It was very impressive, and I didn't want to stop you. Thank you for preparation for such impressive results. Jonas, it's your turn to start. Please, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you for the invite, and I have a couple of sheets as well, so I hope you see them now. Jonas Onland, I have a background in business and government, work for the associations of Dutch municipalities. We represent 355 municipalities in the Netherlands, and closely work together with our national government and but also European level, the European Commission, on digital transformation and the upscaling. And the Netherlands with 17 million people, if you compare it on a global level, it's almost one big city. And we try to approach it like that from a global perspective. So that's why and from the past, we always talk about smart cities, which has a lot of technology push in it. And the challenge that we face, and especially with COVID, but even more showing, is that we need to look at it from a societal perspective. So what we try to do with this digital transformation, it's not about the technology, but about the challenges that we face as a society, not only in the Netherlands, but on a global level. So how do we move towards a societal intelligence through innovation? And innovation in that sense is a different way of working. Well, I'll briefly go through this one, but on a European level, but also in the Netherlands, what you see is we're not only in one crisis, we're in several crises: environmental, social, and economic. And when I watched half a year ago Planet Earth with my son, this was the first episode. And what you see here are walruses, which have fled to land because there's no ice anymore. And after half an hour, my son said, "Daddy, I don't want to watch this anymore because what's happening in the world." So at that point, it really kicked into me, okay, what's happening now? And we need to act now if you look at it from a sustainability perspective. Of course, you see the US, the values that we always had are currently changing. So the Black Lives Matter movement is a statement of a lot of people, of the voice of the community. And what's interesting on this picture is that there's also a tension between the White House, literally, and what mayors think. So the mayor of Washington allowed to paint this on the road. So it's very interesting to see how the role of cities and municipalities is changing, also the way things are governed. Then from a social perspective, currently more people die by suicide than violence on a global level. More people die by overweight than by hunger. So WALL-E is a very interesting movie to watch, especially if you know that it's also based on Steve Jobs' thoughts. And the question is, do we want to have a world which is polluted and we grow and live in space, basically, which is happening as well. So we really have to make a choice as mankind, basically, on how to work on that. We even have a solution for eternal life. This guy is actually experimenting on certain drugs to become younger. So the technology is there. That's not the issue. And then the last thing that is up is happiness. And that's going to accelerate in the upcoming 2 years as well, with the development of AR and VR in extended reality. So the speed that is happening there, even looking at the discussion between Fortnite and Apple, there's a whole new game coming up again. And all these things are very interesting and have a lot of potential, but the question is, how do we deal with it? Then the last thing, it's the economic part. So COVID, especially now, everybody looks on health, but in 2021, what you see is that the economic crisis will kick in because governments are still supporting now, but then at one point we really need to change the way we live and work and so on. So it's very interesting. And on the second hand, and then you have GAFAM, Google, the big corporates in the US, and these sheets I've been doing for 3 years now, and I always ask, what's the current value of GAFAM? And when I did this 3 years ago, it was $2.9 trillion. And since the beginning of COVID, the value of these companies has increased to 6.2 trillion in half a year. So it doubled. But it's more about the last 4 words, based on our behavior. And the question I always ask is, shouldn't they be paying us? Because it's the value of the community on which they earn the money, and shouldn't that go back to the end user? It's interesting because the European Commission now has a big legislation coming up on the Digital Service Act, which is very, very interesting on the regulation of platforms in Europe. And this is one of the main topics which is addressed there. So these are things that we see. And then I really like this picture in that sense that currently we're still thinking about COVID. There's a big recession coming up on economic perspective. And after that, of course, we have the sustainability questions, which really forces us to think different. And currently we're still stuck in the system. So we need a different way of working in which digital disruption is coming. It's a chance, but also a threat. Sustainability, we're still stuck in certain silos, especially government. Data is very fractured. And if you really want to make it human-centered, we need to do something. The way we interact with human and technology is very interesting, especially with AI coming up, becoming smarter and smarter. So digital transformation is not a technology transformation, it's a cultural change. And McKinsey showed it very nicely a couple of years ago, big research on what are the main drivers to create digital transformation. And with on number one, it's cultural and behavioral challenges. So it's the way we work. 80% is human behavior and how to do that differently. So how do we approach this in the Netherlands, but also from the European perspective? We, on one hand, you have a big discussion in Europe, okay, how does it work in China, which is at this point accelerating at an incredible speed, which is very impressive, to be honest, but also there's also some questions on the big brother idea. In the US, you have more the corporate approach with the big corporates, and the European Commission has made a big statement on the new policy for the upcoming 7 years, and they call it the third way. So the question is how to do that, and then we need to start with a question: in what society do we want to live, in which we make use of the potential of technology and safeguard the public interest? And that's a very important question. So we first start with principles and the way we want to approach this, and then we start thinking, okay, and how do we apply these technologies? One of the big things in Europe and in the Netherlands is upscaling. So the implementation, like Romi said earlier, how do you implement it? And what you see with COVID is that it's helping to accelerate. But what we try to do is to make more focus, to bring more focus through mission-driven upscaling. And what we defined are certain icon projects. And we define an icon project which is a solution for several society challenges with multiple technologies. And at this point, we still see 3 main icon projects, but that could change, of course, also from the food perspective and so on. And that's where we bring these different technologies in place. But it's much more important, it's also a cultural thing, because people understand the citizen card or a digital twin. A lot of mayors have less, let's say, affiliation with AI or blockchain or something like that. But they understand by applying a digital twin, I can do scenario planning with my community. I can manage my operation of a city in a much more effective way. So it's more about storytelling and also bringing communities together behind it. And we do that within these icon projects. So what you see is that these topics are there, but this is still something that could be evolved. And the citizen card is about digital services and to get health services, but also on permits and so on. The digital twin is much more about operating the system. And in the upcoming 10 years, we will see urban air mobility come up in a very high speed. How do we do that? We really work together with the different ecosystems. So we have several ecosystems where you have the multiple helix with institutions, businesses and governments together working with the communities. And what we try to do, and that's work in progress, because it's getting to get to know each other's language and so on, is learning by doing. So we develop these projects, and from there we start working with the different ecosystems and bringing synergies there. And from a European perspective, one of the big things that you see is that Joint Boost Sustain and Living in the EU, like you see here on the left side, it's a movement, bottom-up movement with several cities throughout Europe, but also supported by the European Commission to upscale digital solutions towards 300 million Europeans. So if you look at livingin.eu, we're launching a platform there as well. And that's where all cities, but also member states can participate to accelerate. And the ambition is even to do that bigger, of course, but we start with Europe. And then the last sheet, one of the brilliant opening lines, if people start working with Google, they always say, don't try to be smarter than anyone. because your head will explode. Don't try to work harder. Everybody has a startup there, so came from a startup. So your body will give up. Just have fun, and especially that last word is very important. Yeah, it should be fun to make a difference, and that's a big help in succeeding, in my opinion. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting and very useful, and I thank to all three of you because we heard about very interesting and inspiring and working projects and the challenges we're as society are facing today. I would like to ask you which problems and challenges did you like in organizations or personally faced during implementing these projects? What was the most difficult? And I would like you to share the experience of the people who will watch us and maybe whom you will inspire to do something. What was the most difficult and unexpectedly difficult, for example, for you? Jonas, I think you're ready to start, please. Welcome.
Yeah, let me think. I think it's getting people to be open from a cultural perspective, to be open to listen to each other and to understand each other, to accept that a tech guy talks different than a policymaker, and that mutual understanding and almost curiosity to investigate that. I think that's in the beginning. We also were too much pushing, so bringing in your own idea and that doesn't work. So much more focusing on bringing people together and setting the boundaries in that sense, that you need to be open for other ideas to start accelerating. I think that's very important. What you also see is that innovation becomes a buzzword. So everybody's having co-creation sessions and doing interesting things and inspiring things. But then we really walked into the issue of how do we go beyond a living lab. So 2 days ago, our director said it nicely. He said, working together is not a soft skill, it's a hard skill. And you need certain governance to be in place to have that clear boundaries to accelerate. And I think that I fully agree on that.
Thank you very much. Who else is ready to take the word and to continue? Romi, would you?
Yes, of course. So I think it's a very good question, and I think it's my answer would be different if you would ask me before the corona that kind of burst into our lives. Implementation is one of the hardest thing, and it doesn't matter in which sector it is, and it doesn't matter if it's also in the most innovative companies in the world like Google and Facebook. They have also a very hard time implementing, and it's something that was important for me to say. I've been kind of seeing what was going on here in organizations, mostly in the public sector. If it doesn't matter if it's in the education or of course the health organizations and the different offices. And I think bureaucracy and fear, and the third thing, internal corporate politics, are three things that are really kind of the ones that are pushing back innovation and pushing back movement and implementation of new technologies. And what was really interesting and actually funny watching kind of from a side is that you know, what's going on kind of forced the entire market with, you know, the constraints to create some kind of digital transformation. And, you know, some did it great, some did it less better. But I think it gave everyone kind of a feel that they said, well, you know what? Okay, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe it's not that bad, you know, look at us doing it right now. So, I mean, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear making a change. There's a lot of fear, you know, that somebody is coming up with an idea and saying, you know, let's do things differently. Let's put in technology. Let's put in more data. Let's use other, you know, skills and it's really frightening. People really love doing things the way they know, the way, you know, it's familiar to us and it's totally natural. But now there was a huge constraint and we couldn't say to the corona, you know what, give us a year. We'll think what we can do with it, you know, come back next year and we'll be more prepared. No, it was now. And I think this something was very special and gave, I think, a lot of organization, also the industrial kind of sector and the less maybe tech industries, kind of a glimpse that they can also be technological. They can also do this transformation. They can do it. So I think this is something very good that came out of, you know, this times. So this is kind of my perspective on it.
Thank you very much. Gregory, are you ready?
Yes, please. So I think it's a very interesting question. And what I could see, for instance, here in the UK, that you have some kind of institutional projects like a portal that everyone can volunteer and help. And then what we could see here in the UK, that almost 1 million people registered, and the system was not really capable to work with all the people who were registered. So at the same time, we have some hyper-local projects in the neighborhood when you have like a small WhatsApp groups about several hundreds of people, and sometimes this type of small groups are more efficient. The major challenge is really how to create an ecosystem which relies both on this type of big institutional project, but also on this type of small bottom-up projects. And when the relationship between these two types of projects is not a competition, because sometimes what happens is that particularly in some political systems, the government and the political system kind of really concerned about these independent small initiatives, and they try to prohibit and regulate them. And the major challenge is really not about kind of competition or regulation, but creation of synergy between the bottom-up initiatives on the local level and some kind of institutional initiatives on the country level. So I think that the major challenge is really to avoid this type of competition. The major challenge is to avoid this kind of concerns and the efforts to regulate each other, and to facilitate synergy between the bottom-up and top-down projects. And from my point of view, this is one of the challenges. And you can see that these challenges resolved differently in different countries. So here in the UK, we could see some kind of collaboration that was facilitated by local authorities, for instance. In countries like Russia, for instance, we could see much more regulation and efforts to restrict independent projects. So it's not only about technology again, but it's also about the political context of how these technologies are developed and implemented.
Thank you very much. We have about 10 minutes left, and I would ask you guys if you have questions to each other, maybe. Give me please let me know, and if not, I have the next question. I would like to ask you which spheres from your point of view need this special attention, and where, for example, we now see that education is extremely surviving in this pandemic, and other spheres. Maybe you have some thoughts or projects of your organizations where the changes were implemented with the help of IT industry and where they were estimated, and we can now know the results and just tell it, let the world know about it. Thanks. Who will start? We can just keep the order. Jonas, if you would like to answer, you're welcome.
Yes, of course. It's a good and also difficult question. So on one hand, I think what you see is that everybody approaches it as a fear, but I also see it as a possibility. So on one hand, I think the crisis, what it does from a health perspective, it's very scary. But what you see is that it also forces us to start working together differently. So it accelerates, and also if you see less flights, so it's better for nature, to be honest. And the longer it takes, the more structurally we need to think on how we live. So I think maybe my point I'm trying to make is that by emphasizing on fear, I think we can also look at it from an opportunity or possibility to rethink on the way we live and how we do things. So that's one thing. Well, what I really, but what I also showed in the presentation, scared about is the way the data infrastructure is done, and how do you govern that? So how do you secure that the public interest is secure, that the ownership of data is there, so that that you know that you can, also what Gregory said earlier, I fully believe in that, in trust. So you need to have a system which is based on trust, where you have insight in your information, where you can live your life in a secure and safe way. And that's something that you see on a global scale, the polarization, and that's pretty scary, to be honest. So I think we need to do something about that, and then technology for good can help in that.
Thanks a lot. Romi, what would you say?
Yeah, I want to say that I really agree with Jonas and Dr. Gregory. There's, the elements that usually it seems, a psychological thing, talking about fear, talking about optimism, talking about, bringing together. I think it's super important because a lot of countries and a lot of organizations, there's a break in trust, because when everybody's in a survival mode, it's difficult. It's kind of pushing us against this thing. And I really believe in the power of together, in the power of different minds, in the power of an ecosystem, bringing different solutions to one thing. And I have an example of something very interesting and that happened very fast in Israel, that it took everybody in Israel goes to the army, to the IDF, and they took, they kind of had a kind of an open call for also students from high school and people that just finished their army service in the tech kind of tech units, and also in the high school units, that if they wanted to join different schools in Israel, helping them with IT and making sure that they know how to implement the different kind of Zoom and different applications to the parents and to the students. So that it was something that went kind of on a national level. It was very kind of top, like bottom up, something that happened very, very fast, and not like from the government actually. And it was very, very successful. A lot of people didn't go to work and wanted to do something for the community, wanted to use their talent and capabilities. And a lot of schools had a lot of help from young high school students with great tech orientation, and also from the units in the IDF that were just finished. They couldn't go traveling, so they went and helped to the community kind of, and the schools become more resilient with technology. And it was a very, very nice project that was very creative, very kind of fast. And it was something that helped a lot the education in Israel kind of come back to work.
Great, thank you very much. Gregory.
Yeah, I would agree that certainly the trust is very important. And also what Romi mentioned about as an illustration, I think this is a very good example that one of the key aspects is actually how we mobilize human resources in order to address crisis, and how to facilitate this mobilization in different ways, and the resilience of this mobilization, to what extent we can offer a kind of resilient society that is able to address different type of crisis situations based on what's happening. It's really, really important, and technology can offer this type of flexibility. But I also would like to make a very brief point that I think one of the major big challenges is actually the meeting point between the education and employment. And I think that we experience now a lot of problems with what was coming anyway with the future of work, but now this process has accelerated a lot. And I think that innovation need to address the problems of reskilling and upskilling, and the new forms of professional representation, support new forms of career shifting, because the requirements of job markets changing in the context of crisis. So I think the next big issue is really this kind of meeting point between the education and the employment.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm told that we are about to finish because the next panel is about to start. I'm grateful for this discussion, for this panel. I would like, of course, to talk with you more hours and to have more time. I would ask you, if you don't object, to share your presentations with our viewers, for them to have possibility and time just to discover the projects you are making. And I'm thankful to you for your time, for your attention. Thank you very much. It was very impressive, and looking forward to meeting you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
for
very much.
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Ciao.
Bye.